Washington, D.C. and London. These are the main stories. Pounding the rebel-held Ras Lanouf, Libya's Muammar Gaddafi launches airstrikes on the strategic oil town.
Hello, I'm AlJazeera. Welcome right outside the White House, where behind me, President Barack Obama's national security team is debating the U.S.'s next step in the Libya crisis.
I'm Stephen Cole in London. Our main story from Europe.
We may have brought Gaddafi out of the cold. It's now time to send him back into the cold, and fully and properly.
The EU calls for the world to turn its back on Gaddafi as some of his senior ministers jet off on a round of international diplomacy.
Protests in Egypt after clashes between Muslims and Christian Copts leave at least 13 dead.
Main gear touchdown. The nose of the
and an icon of space travel makes its final landing.
The parachute being deployed.
Hello, Libyan delegates have been meeting with world leaders in Egypt, Malta, Portugal and Belgium as part of a diplomatic blitz. Private planes carrying senior representatives from Muammar Gaddafi's government took off from Libya on Wednesday. The move comes as Western powers discuss more potential sanctions against Gaddafi's regime. Inside Libya, Gaddafi's forces have become more aggressive, attacking rebels with heavy weapons and airstrikes. In the last few hours, a Libyan jet hit a fuel depot in the port of Sidra near Ras Lanouf. The facility is engulfed in a firestorm. Well, the battle goes on for AlJazeera, a strategically important town near Tripoli. Reports are coming in that Gaddafi's forces have entered the main square, and one doctor on the ground says at least 40 people died in the day's fighting. And in Bin Jawad, we're getting reports that rebel forces have been pushed back and that government forces are in control.
These extraordinary pictures from the rebel front line outside Ras Lanouf give a graphic illustration of the challenges facing the uprising. Small groups of men mill around, encouraging each other. After a quiet few hours, the air raids have begun again. Suddenly, there's a target to aim at. A few more seconds pass, and then a Libyan warplane can clearly be seen. This is why it's so hard for the rebels. They have so little time to aim their guns. Given all that, it remains striking how defiant they are.
Where is Gaddafi? We want him here where we're fighting. Gaddafi is sitting in his control room.
This is game over, Gaddafi.
We really want you to just leave Libya and save us from all this bloodshed. Let the young generation rebuild Libya from scratch.
It says nothing for Gaddafi that he's unable to take more advantage of these weaknesses. His latest offer to talk to the media in Tripoli turned into a farcical speech behind a curtain in the middle of the night, in which he once again suggested there was no domestic opposition.
It's a small group from Afghanistan, Algeria, Egypt and Palestine who entered cities. They recruited youngsters, juveniles under the age of 20, upon whom the law cannot even apply. How did they recruit them? They told them to chant, "Say Allahu Akbar."
The apparent target for the warplanes, assuming they fired accurately, was a fuel storage facility which erupted in flames. Ras Lanouf is home to one of Libya's biggest oil terminals. This will have done nothing to calm any nerves in the international community. After the bombing run, the fighters move in convoy towards Ras Lanouf to take their fight to the ground. Just as inevitably, a few minutes later, the ambulances start coming back. The weaknesses of both sides in all this mean the chaos looks open-ended. This is how failed states happen. Lawrence Lee, AlJazeera.
Well, Gaddafi's forces have become more aggressive, as we were saying, in recent days. Government troops have been using heavy weaponry and airstrikes to pound rebel positions. Tony Bertley is in AlJazeera, which is still under rebel control.
if it was deliberate, the attack on the oil refinery depot in Ras Lanuf shows a worrying trend and escalation, and is bringing home the fears of many people here that Gaddafi will unleash his air force and destroy the oil and gas installations in the area. Fortunately, this was only an oil storage depot, but if it was the gas installation complex, which is not far away, then it would be far worse scenario. Thousands of people would be killed when toxic gases would be released into the air. So it's a very, very worrying time for people here. But it's showing also that the front lines here are very fluid. We understand from the government sources that they're claiming they've taken the Bin Jawad area back. The opposition forces say they still have it. It's very confusing to get an accurate handle on what is going on. But there is confusion, but there is also ultimate determination from the opposition forces. They're still massing no matter what. They are intent on going down that road and progressing as far as possible. And even if that means their death, they're very committed to this situation. We can tend to think that maybe things are going on behind the scenes. There may be talks going on in secret to try and get a peaceful solution, because we haven't yet seen Gaddafi unleash the full might of his force. We know that 200 kilometers away in Sirte, his stronghold, there's high-tech weaponry and there are 4,000 well-trained men. He hasn't used them yet. We're seeing every single day the Air Force in action dropping 2 or 3 bombs, but largely these are missing their targets. So we're asking the question, are the pilots deliberately doing that, or are they just sending a warning signal? We don't know. It's a very confusing situation. It seems to become more confused by the day.
Still ahead on the News Hour, why Russian energy companies are keeping a close eye on events in the Middle East. Now, 3 weeks into the bloody conflict in Libya, the US president is still trying to figure out which course of action to pursue. Daljit Dhaliwal is in Washington, D.C. with the very latest. Daljit?
Lauren, thanks very much. Well, as global powers debate a no-fly zone over Libya, Barack Obama's approach towards military intervention is also facing a stern test, namely when to use force to protect civilians. With the violence escalating on the ground, the United States Commander-in-Chief must soon decide whether Gaddafi's crackdown requires such a response. Rosalind Jordan has more.
Barack Obama has never issued what one might call a doctrine for his foreign policy, but he did say this soon after becoming president.
Rules must be binding. Violations must be punished. Words must mean something.
In the case of Libya, with almost daily reports of government attacks on civilians, the president's words have become a test for his administration. Civilians and rebel fighters have been pleading with the U.S. for protection. And in 2005, the U.S. and other member states endorsed the United Nations Responsibility to Protect doctrine, which calls on these countries to intervene if they believe genocide is occurring, something that didn't happen for Rwanda or Kosovo. But a former U.S. State Department official under the Obama administration told AlJazeera the fighting in Libya isn't genocide per se. That said,
we are going to see evidence of extraordinary brutality. We're already seeing it in terms of just mowing down civilians, but I think this is not going to be something that a president is going to want to have on his conscience.
Also confusing observers, Obama's statement made during his speech in Cairo.
I know there has been controversy about the promotion of